Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Kaf Aleph. We are at the top of Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. Let me share my screen and we'll really get started. Yesterday, we saw the following statement. Rav Dimi, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he said, if you say, I will eat or I will not eat, those are false oaths. So it's the sheker if violated. And so as a result, the prohibition associated with them is you shall not swear falsely by my name, which is in Vayikra Parak Yud Tet Pasuk Yud Bet. But if you use the terms I ate and I did not eat, well, then that would be considered a vain oath. So again, sheker is the future, shav or vain is the past. And then there's konamot, which and the pasuk for the past is you shall not invoke the name of Hashem in vain. That's from the Seres HaDibros. And then konamot, that's nidarim. Again, if they are false and you lie about it, so then that's going to be a violation of lo yachel dvaro, that you shouldn't profane his word. He shall not profane his word. So we then ask the question regarding Rav Dimi's distinction, because he's got sheker is about the future, and shav is about the past. So, but there's another brisa that says that a vain oath and a false oath are one. So what does that mean that they're one? One might have thought that it means that they apply to the same cases, meaning that they're both about the past or they're both about the future. So yesterday we offered three possible answers, rejecting the first two and concluding that vain and false oaths are one since they both are punished with lashes. And so that's what we're talking about. They both get that punishment. And so now, as we pick up in the middle of the top line of Kaf Aleph Amud Bet, the Gemara offers another answer. So the Ibayasema, or we could say that here's the answer to the question of why we're saying that both vain and false oaths are one, even though according to Rav Dimi, false oaths go on the future and vain oaths go on the past. Kashem shemevi korban al sheker, kach mevi korban al shav. That actually, just as you offer a sacrifice for a false oath about the future, so too you offer a sacrifice about a vain oath about the past. The Rabbi Akiva, and it follows Rabbi Akiva, demechayev l'shavar kila haba. He's the one who says that just as you're obligated about an oath regarding the future, so too you're going to be obligated about an oath regarding the past. Now, this is a important statement because an oath about the past means that essentially you're liable for a sacrifice, even though all you've done is you haven't done any action. You've done, all you've done is speak. So meisvei. So in second, they asked and they said maybe this doesn't work because ezehu shvuas shav. We've got a brisa that says what is considered a shvuas shav, nishba l'shanos. That's where you're swearing to change something that's true. That again, that implies the path. And we're going to skip the next three words, es hayadula adam, because the Ritva points out that actually is likely sort of like a language that we'll see later on, because that's going to be a different opinion about what a shvuas shav is that we will see shortly. But the bottom line is that this is really about the past. And shvuas sheker, what is a shvua that is false? Nishba lahachlif. It's again where you swear to change what's true, but that changing what's true, Rashi explains, nishba lahachlif, last of the wide lines at the top of Rashi on Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph, lishnos es ha'emes b'shvuaso. It's to change what's true with your oath. And hainu l'shavar, that's also about the past. Kagon achalti v'lo achal, lo achalti v'achal. Whether it's you say that you ate and you didn't eat, or you didn't eat and you ate. So the point is that's what it's about. So the point is that now we have this brisa says that both are about the past. So Ema, so you know what? We'll change the brisa. Nishba umachlif. Don't say that it's going to be nishba lahachlif, that you're going to change what already happened, but rather say you're going to swear and then make it so that it's not true. Make it change. So as Rashi says, next Rashi, second line of the narrow lines, Ema nishba umachlif, nishba la asot. So you first swear to do something, v'achar kach, and then afterwards, hechliv as dvaro, you change your words, v'lo asa, and you don't do it, o shalo lasos v'asa, or you swear not to do something, and then you do it. So that's about the future, and so we've made this brisa consistent with Rav Dimi's statement. And so we can say that really this, so we have two possible answers about what it means that false oath and vain oaths are one. Either it's referring to lashes, or it is referring to the sacrifices, and it's according to Rabbi Akiva. So Meisvei, I'm sorry, now Kiyosim Rabin. So often, whenever you have Rav Dimi coming from the land of Israel to Bavel to tell us what Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabin also does the same thing. And so when Rabin came, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Abahu, Rabbi Yochanan, so he said in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, in the name of Rabbi Abahu, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Abahu is going to be important here because we're going to explain how he knew that Rabbi Abahu made his statement. Achalti v'lo achalti. If it's about the past, I ate or I did not eat, sheker. So we've changed it around completely. Sheker is not about the future, according to Ravin. It's about the past. And so, and then vazhara milos yishavu bishmi l'shaker. But the warning about it is the same thing. Meaning the pasuk that tells you that you can't do it, we're not changing. Ochel v'lo ochel. What about the future? Again, the future was what we called sheker last time. So what? And the past was what we called shav. So now we've changed the past to sheker. And now what about the future? What is that called? Over below Yachel Dvaro. That is not we're not going to call that shav either. That's just if you say that you're going to do something and then you don't do it, you're profaning your word. And so as a result, that's what that applies to. Ve'ezahu shvuas shav. And what about the shvuas shav category, which we haven't explained what it is? So that's nishba l'shanos as a yadua la'adam. That's where you change something that everybody knows is true. So if I were to say this table, which is clearly made of plastic, it's made out of wood, then that would be, and I swear to that effect, that would be a shvuas shav, according to Ravin. So Amra Papa, Had Rabbi Abahu. This statement in the name of Rabbi Abahu that was made by Ravin, Lav lebeferish itmar. Rabbi Abahu did not explicitly say that was what the position was of Rabbi Yochanan, Elamiklala itmar, but rather it was implicit in something that he said. Now we are about to tell a story about a conversation that happened, and it's going to take much of the rest of today's daf to tell that story, the first part of the daf, the daf, the Amud Aleph, and then we will get to the point that where Rabbi Abahu says, we see from here that in fact that sheker is about the past, and shav is about and not about the future. So let's take a look and we will see. So the Amar of Edi bar Avin, Amar Rav Amram, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So it was said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. None of them are Rabbi Abahu yet. We haven't introduced him yet. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Yossi Aglili. And Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda and the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Kol Lo, and this highlights how we try to maintain the tradition, meaning we try and understand who the source is from whom, so that we understand where it came from. So what do they say? So kol lo says Torah, any kind of prohibition in the Torah, lav sheyesh bo ma'isa loken alav. If it has an action, it's subject to lashes. V'she'ein bo ma'isa ein loken alav. And when it doesn't have an action, it's not subject to lashes. Now, that's not quite true, because we saw things like lav shenitak la'aseh, where you have something there where it's a prohibition, but the Torah gives you a fix. And we've seen previously that you don't get lashes in that case. But in any event, in general, we'll say that this is true. But the real point of what Rabbi Yossi Glili is saying is chutz minishpa umeimar umikalas chaveru b'shem. There are three kinds of speaking where you are going to get lashes, even though you haven't done any action. So one is if you were to swear, make a false oath. Umeimar, if you try to substitute one animal for another. Umekalas chaveru b'shem, and if you try to curse somebody using the name of God. Now, okay. So nishpa minalan. So the Gemara asked, well, how do we know about the case of nishpa? That's the only one we're going to talk about. We're not going to do the proofs for the Mekalel and the Meimar. But how do I know about the first one? Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Amar Kra, the Torah says, Lo sisa Shem Hashem Elokecha Lashav, that you shouldn't take Hashem's name in vain. Ki lo yinakeh, that because Hashem is not going to forgive you. So this is the statement that we, and we're about to have a conversation that we mentioned at the very end of the daf yesterday. So based in Shomala, Emenakin Ola Oso, that the heavenly court is not going to forgive him. So aval based in Shalmata, Malkinoso, Umenakinoso. So although Hashem won't forgive on God's own, if the court below gives him lashes, so then that will cause him to be clean, to absolve him of his sin. So Amrle Rav Papa Abaye, Rav Papa asked Abaye, as we saw at the end of the day yesterday, Dilma Hachikama Rachmana, Lo Yanaka Klal. Maybe the Torah is telling us that when it says Lo Yanakeh, it means never under any circumstances, even if the person were to get lashes. So you can't use that as a proof that the person would get lashes. So yesterday we briefly just noted that Abaye responded to it, but we didn't give the full details of his answer. Here is his full details of his answers. Iksiv ki lo yanakeh. If it would have just said ki lo yanakeh, so ki lo yinakeh, as opposed to ki lo yinakeh. So then kida amrat, then it would have been like you said. But hashta tiksiv ki lo yinakeh Hashem, that it's specifically with respect to Hashem that's not going to absolve, right? It doesn't leave it blank and it say that he's not going to be absolved, and it doesn't say who's going to do the absolution. But here it does say, it says that Hashem's not going to. So Hashem hu de'enu menakeh, aval based in shalmata malkinoso umenakinoso. So, but the lower court, the court, the human court, can lash him and cause him to have an absolution. So Ashkechan Shevuot Shav. So all right, so that tells us about Shevuot Shav, because of course that was the quote from the Ten Commandments, where it says Lo sisa es Shem Hashem Elokecha Lashav, that you can't take God's name in vain. So that's swearing falsely in a shav manner, which we saw now, according to Ravin, is swearing something that you don't know, everybody can see is false. So shua sheker minalan. How do I know about a false oath, meaning according to Ravin, that would be an oath about the past. So Rabbi Yochanan Didei Amar, Rabbi Yochanan said in his own name, meaning that he said not in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, because that was who he spoke in the name of before. So they were trying to distinguish the two. Lashav shtei pamim. Well, that pasuk actually says lashav 2 times, because it says lo sisa shema Hashem elokecha lashav ki lo yinakeh Hashem es asher yisa es shmo lashav. So we have l'shav 2 times. It doesn't need to say it 2 times. So im eino inyan l'shvua shav. You don't need the second one to tell us anything about the vain oath, because we already said it. So teneu inyan l'shvua sheker. So as a result, we'll say that it applies to a different kind of oath, namely a shvua sheker. So Havi va Rabbi Abau, and this is where Rabbi Abau asked the question, and Rabbi Abau is going to answer the question. And say, and that answer is going to make clear that a Shavuos Sheker must be about the past, because we haven't said Tanei Inyan Shavuos Sheker. We just said that it should apply to Shavuos Sheker. We haven't said what Shavuos Sheker is. So Vahavi Va Rabbi Abau asked the question: Hi Shavuos Sheker Hechidami. What's the case of a Shavuos Sheker? Ilema Shavuos Shelo Ochel VaAchal. If you want to tell me that it's an oath about the future where you say you didn't eat, that you're not going to eat, and then you went ahead and ate, lav sheyesh bo maisahu. We're talking about our effort to bring a proof right now is to prove that these prohibitions are prohibitions that, even though they don't involve an action, result in lashes. But if in fact you swear that you're not going to eat and then you do eat, that is an action. So Ella de Amar Shvua Sha'ochel V'lo Achal. You want to say that maybe it's an oath that you are going to eat and then you don't eat? Well, that would be certainly a situation where you would be liable for violating the Torah for not doing something. But Haimi Loka, does that person really get lashes? Baha Idmar, Shvua Sha'ochel Kikarzu Hayom, Va'avar Hayom, V'lo Achla. As we've seen previously, if somebody swears, I'm going to eat this cookie today, and he doesn't eat it all day, Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish, Da'amri Tarvayu, Eino Loka. Both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish agree that you're not going to get lashes. Indeed, we saw this Gemara a couple of times already. We saw it earlier on Gimel Amud Bet. We saw it in Makot. So and if you go even further back, we saw it in Psachim. But the bottom line is, at least we saw it 2 times relatively recently, 3 weeks ago, and then 4 weeks ago, I guess. So we've seen this, the fact that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both agree that the person doesn't get lashes, but for different reasons. Rabbi Yochanan Omer Eino Loka. Rabbi Yochanan says you don't get lashes mishum dahavelav she'ein bo ma'isa, because there's no action involved. V'kol lav she'ein bo ma'isa ein logan alav, and you don't get lashes for something with no action. V'reish Lakish Omer Eino Loka mishum dahava hasra safek, because it's an uncertain warning. No matter what time you go to the person and say, listen, you better eat the cookie before the end of the day, there's more time in the day. And so as a result, there's no point in time, and because it's uncertain when the day ends, that it's especially true. It's no point in time where you can point definitively and say, hey, if you don't eat the cookie this second, you're going to be violating your oath, because there is no this second, because every moment there's more additional time, or it's too late already. Vasra Sovek Lo Shma Asra, and according to Rabbi Reish Lakish, an uncertain warning isn't a valid warning. So Va'amar Rabbi Abau. So as a result, Rabbi Abau says, Tehei ba'achalti v'lo achalti. So it must be that the case of sheker that the Gemara is analyzing and asking about and referring to as a case of a situation where you don't do an action and you are going to get lashes, it must be about the past. Tehei ba'achalti v'lo achalti. So as a result, it must be that it's I ate or I did not eat. Now again, this was Rabbi Abau analyzing this. And everything was being said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. And so Rabbi Abau did not explicitly say that Rabbi Yochanan said sheker equals achalti velo achalti, that sheker equals an oath about the past, but he derived it from everything. And so as a result, that's what it says. That's why we had said earlier that even though that we quoted it as if Rabbi Abahu said it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, it was really just implied. So umayshna. So all right. So why is this different? Why is the past different from the future? Meaning, once we're going to say that shav applies twice and we're going to use it to learn something else, why focus on the past and not on the future case? So Amarava Beferish, Ribsa, Torah, Shvua, Sheker, Doma L'Shav. That because it's using the word shav to tell us sheker, it must be that the shav, that just like a shav oath is about the past, mashav l'sha'avar, av sheker nami l'sha'avar. Just as the vain oath is about the past, so too the sheker must be about the past. And so as a result, we're going to say that Rabbi Abahu again must agree that is the source for our saying that Rabbi Yochanan says that sheker refers to the past. Okay, and so we have again these two different views. According to Ravin, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, it's sheker that's about the past, and shav is about something that is false, something that is like everybody knows is false. And whereas when we originally had Rav Dimi, then sheker was about the future and shav was about the past. Okay, so Eisve Rabbi Yirmiyah le Rabbi Abahu. So Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Abahu, 1 second, you're telling me that sheker is about the past and that you get lashes, but what about the following Mishnah? Shvuah shelo ochel kikarzu. If you swear that you're not going to eat this loaf, shvuah shelo ochlena, and then you say again an oath that I'm not going to eat it, and shvuah shelo ochlena, and again another oath that you're going not to eat it, v'achla, and you eat it. So eino chayav ela achat. You're only liable once. Now, the reason that you're only liable once is because once you made an oath about something, you can't make another oath. It's already covered. So as a result, you're only going to be liable for one item. And zuhi shvuas bitoy. This is an example of a shvuas bitoy. Now, again, shvuas bitoy is a larger category. Shechayvin al zidona makot, that you're liable for lashes for having done it if you do it intentionally. And you're liable for a variable sin offering, the offering that depends on your wealth, if you do it unwittingly. So that's, now we have this Mishnah. This is a Mishnah that we'll see in about a week on Kav Zayin Amabet. And so this Mishnah suggests that it is specifically about the future that we are going to have lashes. So zuhi lemu'ute mai. This language of zuhi shvuas bitoy shechayben al zedona makot, that implies that there might be another kind of shvuas bitoy for which one does not get makot. So what is that coming to exclude? Lav lema'ute achalti v'lo achalti? Is it, maybe it's coming to tell us that that if you swear about I ate or I did not eat, delo lucky, and then it turns out that it's false because you did eat or you didn't, or you didn't eat or you did eat. So then you won't get lashes about the past. Isn't that what this Mishnah is implying? No. Lo lemu'ute achalti v'lo achalti mikorban. It's not to exclude them from lashes, because you do get lashes based on the lesson that we just saw of shav appearing 2 times in the pasuk. And so we'll say that just as a shvuas shav gets lashes, so too we'll say that a shvuas sheker gets lashes, and they're both about the past. So no, shvuas shelo, this is a situation where you only will have to be liable to korbanot if you are doing about the future, but not if you did about the past. So lo and zuhi da al shigagasa karban olav yored. That the point is that although we say this is the one for which you're liable to lashes, but we also say this is the one that you're liable to having to offer the karban olav yored. So the point is when we say that this is the shuas bitoy, that you're liable for lashes and liable for the variable offering, the key element of it is that it's the liable for the variable offering. It's specifically that piece that we're going to say you are is true only when it's the future and not when it's the past. Aval achalti v'lo achalti lo v'Rabbi Yishmael he, and this follows Rabbi Yishmael. De'amar eino chayav ela al ha'asid lavo, that you're only liable for oaths about the future. Aval milka lucky, but you would get lashes about the oath of the past. As we turn to Kaf Aleph Hamibet. So Ema Seifa, 1 second though. You want to tell me, my apologies for not having scrolled. I realize now that I haven't scrolled this whole day. So I'll stop there for a moment. So Ema Seifa, 1 second. You're going to tell me that the end of our that this Mishnah, the beginning of this Mishnah, follows Rabbi Yishmael, who says that you get lashes about both about the past and the future, but you only offer a korban olav yored about the future. But the Seifa says zuhi shuas shav. This is the example of a vain oath, shechayvin al zedona makos, that you're liable for lashes associated with it, val shigagasa patur, and you're exempt from the korban olav yored for doing it unwittingly. So zuhi again, zuhi lema'ute mai. What is this coming to exclude? My lav lema'ute achalti v'lo achalti delo lucky. Isn't it coming to tell us here as well that only the vain oath gets lashes and not the oath about the past? So lo, no, it doesn't have to mean that. Zuhi da'al shigagasa patur mi korban. No, this is the one that when you're unwittingly do it, you're not going to be liable for a korban olav yored. Aval achalti v'lo achalti al shigagasa chayiv korban. But if you were to swear about the past, I ate or I did not eat, and then it's not true, and you did that accidentally, so you would be subject to a korban olav yored. The Rabbi Akiva and this is Rabbi Akiva to mechayev l'sha'avar kila haba, and he's the one who says that you're obligated for a korban olav yored about the past, just as you're chayev for one about the future. 1 second though. Amrat Reisha Rabbi Yishmael he. So Reisha Rabbi Yishmael, the Seifa Rabbi Akiva. So, but you told me 2 seconds ago on Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph that in fact the beginning of that Mishnah, which is it's actually 2 separate Mishnayos in our Gemara, but it's one combined statement as the Gemara is understanding it, right? Because the first part is on Kav Zayin Amud Bet and the second part is on Kav Tet Amud Aleph. But the point is that it should be all one author. Now, it is true that sometimes we'll say the beginning of a Mishnah is one author and the end is another author, but we don't want to do that. So as a result, the Gemara explains, no, Kula Rabbi Akiva. Really, it's all Rabbi Akiva. So forget what we said about the Kav Zayin Amud Aleph, Kav Zayin Amud Bet initially, and we said that was Rabbi Yishmael, and because again, so now we have to give a new answer. So how do we understand the Reisha now? So now let me scroll again. So how do we understand the Reisha? So the Reisha, lavla mu'ute achalti v'lo achalti mikorban. And so it's not coming to exclude I ate or I did not eat from a korban, because again, Rabbi Akiva says you are liable for a korban in that. And it seems like we're saying, and according to the position of Ravina, we're saying that you're also liable to sacrifices to lashes, because he's the one who notes in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that you're liable for both lash that that this is a situation where you're liable for lashes, and we learn it from, according to Rabbi Yochanan, we learn it from the fact that shav is repeated twice in the Aseres Adibros, and so as a result, we're saying that both shav and sheker get lashes. So we can't say that it's any excluding the lashes case. Elalamute ochel v'lo ochel lo achal mimalchus. So what it's coming to exclude is an oath about the future with respect to lashes. Aval karban mechayev, but it would be liable to a sacrifice. So again, what did the Reisha say? Let's just make sure that we it all fits, right? So if I say I'm not going to eat this loaf, aha. If I say I'm not going to eat this loaf and then I do eat it, well, then I'm good. That's the case that the Rabbi Yirmiyah, that will be mentioned in our Mishnah, where you do have an action, and so as a result, you are going to be subject to lashes. So what it's coming to exclude is specifically the case of I will eat and then you didn't eat, because the case that we quoted in the Mishnah on Kav Zayin Amud Bet is a case of I'm not going to eat, and the person did eat. So the person did make an action. So here we're saying that in a situation where I swear I'm going to eat something and then I don't, I don't get lashes because I didn't do an action, but I will be subject to a karban. Umaishna, what's the difference about an oath of I will eat from the that you're going to that oath is excluded from the Mishnah, but not an oath about the past? Meaning, why say that I will eat is the case that's being excluded and not the case of I ate? So mistabra koi bilaba mima'et lahaba, that since the Mishnah is talking about a case of I'm not going to eat, I swear that I'm not going to eat this, which is a future case. So too, when it comes to what we're going to exclude, we're going to exclude the case about the future. So kai bilahaba mima'et l'sha'avar, and that makes more sense than saying a case about the future and excluding about the past. So that's how we can say that, in fact, we can explain this Mishnah. Okay. So we've now explained that the Mishnah is all according to Rabbi Akiva, and we have, again, the 4 different cases. In 3 of the 4 cases, you are going to get lashes. You're going to get lashes if you swear about the past and it's false, whether you swear that you did eat or you didn't eat. And you're going to get lashes if you swear that you're not going to eat something and then you do eat it. But in all 4 cases, you're going to be subject to the Karban Ola V'Yored. So the last of the 4 cases is if I swear that I am going to eat something and then I don't eat it. So I will be subject to lashes, but I will not be subject to I'm saying I will not be subject to lashes, but I will be subject to the Karban Ola V'Yored. Okay. So Shevuot, so now we continue with our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva said that says that if one swears that he will not eat and then eats even a minimal amount, it's going to trigger liability. While the rabbis require a larger volume to be eaten, they say that it's just like every other case, and by implication suggests that you need to have eaten a kazayas. So the question that the Gemara is going to ask, so Shvuah shelo ochel v'achal kol shehu chayev. So Ibaylahu, they ask the questions, and we're asking a question. Rabbi Akiva, b'chol atura kula, Rabbi Shimon tzviralei. Does Rabbi Akiva actually hold like Rabbi Shimon in the entire Torah, to mechayev v'mashu? Because Rabbi Shimon says that when the Torah says you're not allowed to eat something, it's saying you're not allowed to eat something any amount. It's not, there's no size associated with it. Whatever you eat, that's going to be prohibited. Titania, because we have a brisa. Rabbi Shimon Omer, kol shehu lamakos. If you eat any amount of a prohibited item, that's going to get you lashes. The lo amru kazayas, and the source, although we do have this idea that a kazayas is a certain amount of eating, that reference to the kazayas, that's only Elul Inyan Karban. That's only when it comes to a sacrifice. And it makes sense, right? Because if I'm doing something unwittingly, maybe I need to do more of it to be subject to a sacrifice than if I am doing a prohibition intentionally. If I'm doing a prohibition intentionally, maybe the first little taste should be is enough. Exactly. So, and now let's walk through the logic. And maybe Rabbi Akiva really should have argued with the rest of the rabbis in general, because he agrees with Rabbi Shimon everywhere. And that which they argue over here, and the whole reason that they're arguing here is to show how powerful the rabbis are. That even though one would say that, when it comes to an oath, that if you specifically say, I'm not going to eat even a kernel, then if you eat that kernel, you're going to be liable. And the rabbis agree to it. So as a result, maybe just as when you say, I'm not going to eat a kernel, and you eat the kernel, it's going to cause you to be liable. So too, when you say, I'm not going to eat this thing, even if you eat one little bit of it, you're going to be liable. So as a result, that's why the rabbis tell us that stam nami chayev, that nonetheless, and so I might have thought that even if you don't specify the amount, you'll also be liable. So kamash malan de patre. So as a result, the Gemara is teaching us that the rabbis say, no, you're exempt according to the rabbis. And you're only going to be liable if you eat a kazayas. Odilma, or maybe we could say the opposite. Ba'alma kirabanan svirale, that in general, he holds like the rabbis, meaning that you need to have a kazayas. And here's the reason that and it's only specifically here that he disagrees. After all, if the guy says, I'm going to eat a kernel, if I eat a kernel, then I swear I'm not going to eat this kernel, and he eats the kernel, that's enough. So as a result, if he swears without any specification of an amount, we should similarly make him liable for eating any amount. Meaning it's clear that the amount doesn't always matter. And so that should be sufficient to allow us to say that maybe the amount never matters, unless you say a larger amount. Meaning if you were to say that you're only, that I'm not going to eat this whole cake, right? Then only if you eat the whole cake are you going to be liable. All right. So we're going to try 3 different times to figure out whether Rabbi Akiva argues generally with the rabbis and agrees with Rabbi Shimon, or whether he disagrees with Rabbi Shimon and generally agrees with the rabbis. All 3 times, we're going to be pushing in the same direction, namely that Rabbi Akiva disagrees with Rabbi Shimon generally and agrees with the rabbis that generally you do need a kazayas. But the first time we're going to reject that proof. The second and the third proofs are going to be valid. So let's take a look. So Tashma, Amru lo Rabbi Akiva. So what did the rabbis say to Rabbi Akiva? Where do we find that eating even a minimal amount, this is from our Mishnah, is going to make one liable? That we should also say that this person's liable. But now if in fact Rabbi Akiva really agrees with Rabbi Shimon everywhere, lema lahu, Ana b'chol Torah kula Rabbi Shimon sirli. I think like Rabbi Shimon everywhere. So the fact that Rabbi Akiva answers a different answer and says that if in fact essentially they were to have that where do you see anywhere that an oath that speaking alone creates liability. So here too, it's a unique situation, and speaking with eating just a little bit should also create liability. That's what Rabbi Akiva says in our Mishnah. And he doesn't say, oh, I just hold like Rabbi Shimon. So doesn't that show that he argues with Rabbi Shimon in general, and he doesn't hold like Rabbi Shimon generally, and he agrees with the rabbis generally? No, not necessarily. L'divrayim d'Rabbanan Kamarlo. It could be that Rabbi Akiva was responding to the thinking of the rabbi, saying, listen, Lididi b'chol Torah kula Rabbi Shimon severely. Really, I think like Rabbi Shimon in general. Lididchu, but according to you, Odu li Mia, you should at least admit to me that since if one were to specify a minute amount, one would be liable. Stam nami chayev. They should also be liable if they just say nothing and don't say anything about the amount. But Amrulei Rabbanan lo, and the rabbis say back to him, no, sorry, we disagree with that. So as a result, our first proof has failed. But we're still not dissuaded from our proofs, and we're going to try again. Tashma, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Nazir Shishara Pito B'yayin, if you have a Nazir who sticks bread in wine, B'yeshba Kedei Litzarav Kazayas, and it all totals up, meaning the bread and the wine total up to an olive's volume. So Chayav, so as a result, that is going to be enough for the Nazir to be Chayiv. We're going to treat the bread part as if it were effectively wine. And so as a result, that's going to be enough to cause him to get lashes for eating it. Now, but if in fact Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon, well then even the drop of wine would be sufficient. Lama li l'tzaref? Why does he need to say that it all combines to an olive's volume? Clearly, Rabbi Akiva disagrees with Rabbi Shimon. But you know what? I can even give you another proof. The Tanan, we got another Mishnah. So that again, that first Mishnah is not surprisingly from Nazir Daf Lamed Daled Amabet. This is from below. This is from tomorrow's Daf. The Tanan Shevuot shelo okel. If a person swears that he's not going to eat, v'achal nevelus utrefus shkatzim uramasim, and what he eats is are things that are prohibited in the Torah, chayav, then you're going to be liable. And Rabbi Shimon poter, and Rabbi Shimon, meaning, and we're going to say that. Hold on. So the question is going to be, why are you liable? Because aren't these things that are already prohibited? So why would an oath cause any kind of impact? Rabbi Shimon poter, and Rabbi Shimon says, no, you're exempt. So how do we understand this? Now, Rabbi Shimon, we're going to have to first understand how this can be the case. And we ask a question, Amai chayiv, why are you liable at all for making these oaths? Mushpa mehar Sinaihu. You already swore these things that you wouldn't do them at Har Sinai. These foods are already not kosher. So Rav Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan to Amri Tarvayu. So Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan all say. So it literally says Tarvayu usually means both, but the Masoras Hashas, what does the Masoras Hashas do here? The Masoras Hashas takes suggests that maybe it's that there are a lot of places where that happens in the Gemara, and it really essentially means all of them. So B'kol el dvarim hamutarim im dvarim hasurim, that when the situation is where the person is swearing not to eat certain permitted foods along with these prohibited items. And so as a result, if you say, I'm not going to eat any of these, you have a sumptuous banquet. It's a not kosher banquet. And you say, I'm not going to eat any of the foods on that, but there are kosher foods on it. Maybe there's some fruit, a banana or something like that. So as a result, now that you've sworn everything, if you eat even the kosher, even the non-kosher parts, according to the Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, you're still going to be liable for the oath, because the oath is a valid oath because it included things that you were allowed to eat. Reish Lakish Omer, and Reish Lakish says, Iatamotse Ella, the only kind of case that you can find where causing a prohibition about permitted foods is the following. The mafarish chatzis shir, you have to either say, oh, I'm swearing I'm not going to eat half an olive size, or anything less than an olive size of this not kosher meat, because then you're making yourself liable for something that is more severe than the Torah prohibition. The Torah prohibition says that it's going to be any amount, and that follows the rabbis. But the problem is ibistam ibistam Rabbi Akiva, or where you make no specification of the amount according to Rabbi Akiva. And why is that true? Because our Mishnah tells us that Rabbi Akiva says that when you swear not to eat a nevela, treifa, etc., your oath applies even for a minute amount. So you don't even need to specify. The Amar Adam Oser Atzmo B'Kolshu, because he says that when a person prohibits himself using an oath, you're prohibiting even a minute amount. Now, if in fact Rabbi Akiva generally held like Rabbi Shimon, well then Kol Shehu Nami Mushba V'Omed Mihar Sinai. That would also be an oath that he had taken on from Har Sinai, and so as a result, the Shevuot would not add any additional prohibition. And the point that we're trying to make, according to Reish Lakish, is that you need to add additional prohibition. So it must be that Rabbi Akiva does not say that general prohibitions in the Torah are any amount, but rather you have to eat a kazayas. And so as a result, we must say that in fact, we can learn from here that Rabbi Akiva is like the rabbis, and that in general, Rabbi Akiva says prohibitions require eating the amount of a kazayas, but if you make an oath, well then the oath applies for even a minute amount. So we are not done with our conversation between Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis, but for the continuation of that conversation, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.